Of you are doing well. First and foremost, welcome and thank you so much for joining us and spending your evening with us in this virtual space as we speak about the importance of diversity in education. We appreciate sharing this learning space with you and are just really excited that you have decided to spend your Monday evening with us. My name is Maia Johnson, and I'm also very appreciative to have the opportunity to present alongside my colleague, Miss Amy Bartolotti. As Jessie stated, we are going to introduce ourselves in just a moment so that you know a little bit more about us and what has helped to bring us in this space. If we had more time and we were able to interact, we would want to hear the same exact thing from each and every one of you, but we just want to again express our gratitude for you being with us this evening. We are also grateful and humbled for the opportunity to partner with the Chesterfield County Public Library to bring you tonight's presentation, and are just very thankful for all of the events and the efforts to support and recognize Black History Month. An hour is going to likely fly by, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully technology is on our side and works through our entire time together, but we also know that technology has a mind of its own, so we appreciate Jesse and his team for assisting us should anything happen so that we can work to get it resolved. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. If you see me looking a couple of directions, that's because I have two screens, one with the presentation to advance slides and the other where my Zoom monitor is. So that's why I will look back and forth. But why are we here this evening speaking about the importance of diversity in education? This certainly is not a new conversation. The points that Mrs. Bartolotti and I present, you may have seen them, you may have heard them, and perhaps even more than once. Simply put, but deeply meant, we have work to do. Though public schools are becoming increasingly diverse, teachers of color remain underrepresented in schools across the country. And so again, we have work to do in this regard. And so the work that we are going to speak about in just a moment, it's not only critical, but it takes intentionality, it takes purpose, it takes commitment, it takes care, it takes empathy, and understanding. So today, this presentation is really going to take us to a space where we look at some of what it means to value and sustain a diverse teacher workforce. Each of us, including Amy and me, we are in our own learner seats. And so while for some, this may be a conversation that is not new for several of us. This may be a new conversation. We may hear perspectives that we haven't heard before. And so we respect everyone's individual learner seat. Amy and I are presenting, yes, but we also want to make sure that we allow time for reflection. So during our presentation, during our time together, there are going to be a couple of opportunities and moments for us to personally reflect in the ways in which we feel comfortable doing so. We'll speak more about that in just a moment. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Mrs. Amy Bartolotti, so that we can share a little bit about ourselves. Amy?
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. My name is Amy Bartolotti, and I serve the school division as the coordinator for the Office of Family and Community Engagement. So really looking at engaging our community, our families around issues that impact and elevate public education in Chesterfield. But prior to that, I was a middle school teacher and then worked some time as a dropout prevention specialist. And it was in that capacity that I realized that there were so many other things that impacted the way our students accessed education beyond the classroom, beyond what the curriculum was. And so really taking all of those things and using them together in a way to elevate student learning. And this has been a passion project that I have felt very fortunate to have been able to be involved with, talking about this, looking at how we can best enhance our student experience. And I appreciate the public library. Am humbled by them asking us to participate in this, as well as just the collegiality and the partnership with Dr. Johnson and her Office of Equity, because it is such good work.
Thank you, Amy. And I appreciate having the opportunity to walk alongside you and collaborate as always. Again, good evening, everyone. My name is Maia Johnson, and I currently serve as the coordinator of equity, diversity, and inclusion for Chesterfield County Public Schools. This is my second year in this position. The Office of Equity works across district offices and schools to support applying an equity lens to each undertaking. I always say that the Office of Equity is everyone's office, because it is each of our responsibility to work together to advance access and opportunities for all of our students. So when people ask, and Amy has probably heard me say this many times, but when people, ask how many serve in the Office of Equity, I often share, that if you look at the organizational chart, yes, you will see my name as Coordinator of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. You will see my director as Director of Equity and Student Support Services. But really and truly, the Office of Equity is everyone's office. Each of us has a place in working to meet the needs of our students, families, and staff. Prior to this position, I served as school counseling coordinator in one of our middle schools here in CCPS. Before that, I was in Sussex County Public Schools, rural subdivision, where I served as elementary school counselor, then middle school counselor, and before that, I taught at an alternative school in the city of Petersburg. I never say that I'm a former school counselor. I'm a forever school counselor. I never take that hat off. I am a very, very, very proud three-time graduate of Virginia State University, and above all, I am a wife to a fellow educator and a mom to three beautiful children, ages 9, 7, and almost 2. I have lived in Virginia for about 17 years, grew up in New York, family is from Empire, Alabama. So all of those things, again, just very happy to be here with each of you this evening. So we'll go ahead and get started. This conversation can certainly take us well beyond an hour. So because of time, Amy and I have identified focused topics for our discussion this evening. So tonight we will discuss educator diversity as a lever to educational equity, take a look at what research and data have shown us both nationally and locally as it relates to teacher diversity, reflect on experiences that have been shared by teachers, and lastly, explore supportive practices and the implications for educational outcomes. We will also give a glimpse into the work that we are doing for Mirror Me, which is our school division's teacher diversity initiative. I have shared in many conversations, or shared in conversations many times, and I feel compelled to share the same in this space. And that is, I want to keep everyone encouraged, or encourage us all to speak about educational equity, not as a monolith, because it's not one thing, but to speak about advancing educational equity as many things, because it is many things. Sometimes when we speak about educational equity, we can become hyper-focused on, one thing, one lane, and stay only in that lane. Now, of course, there are times when we have to speak about something specific, like, tonight we have a focus of speaking about educator diversity and hiring and retention practices. So I certainly do not want to discount that, but want to share and reshare or reemphasize that when we are speaking about educational equity, we must be mindful that we are speaking to something that encompasses many things. And so when we stay in one lane and only in one lane, we can miss taking in the larger whole, and taking in the larger whole in a way that is necessary to support our students, families, and staff. And so as a school division, equity is one of our core values. Through our core value, we share our commitment to ensure fair and unbiased access to all resources and opportunities. And so with this lens, again, we share a commitment to supporting our students in the ways that help them to thrive best. And so with that stated, again, going back to educational equity being many things, when we are speaking about educational equity, we are, again, speaking about, not just speaking about one thing, right? We are speaking about access and opportunity. Educational equity is engaging families and stakeholders, tapping into relevance for our students through differentiated curriculum and supports. It's connecting our students and our families to mental health and community resources. It's being mindful of the implications of culture and responding appropriately through culturally responsive practices. It's conscious conversations, and yes, hiring practices, recruiting, staffing, retaining should very, very much be a part of our conversations when we are speaking about equitable considerations. And so for this evening's conversation, we are going to be speaking to teacher diversity. Also, I will say that educational equity is not something that we kick our feet up and say, okay, it is done. Equity has been achieved and the work is finished, right? Like, we celebrate the gains, absolutely do. But working to advance educational equity is continual work. We must continually and collectively make visible opportunities for growth. And so just a moment of pause or reflection. Teachers exist in our lives, inside and outside of the classroom. So we want to fully acknowledge that. So for the purpose of this moment of reflection, we want you to just, and again, reflect to the extent you are comfortable with, but just think for a moment about the teachers in your life. For those of us who went through our formative years, our educational career, without seeing a teacher who looked like us, how did that feel? How did that feel? How about for those of us who did have the opportunity to see teachers before us who looked like us or had similar upbringing or cultural background? What was that experience like? Just, take a moment and think about it for yourself, again, to the extent that you are comfortable. Reality is when we do not see or connect with others who look like us or have similar backgrounds, right? When we do not see someone who looks different than us, there is psychological impact. So when we speak about equity, we must have a conversation about supporting a diverse teacher pipeline. And an abundance of research that we will share, that Amy will get into, shows that an increase in teacher diversity, specifically teachers of color, is linked to increases in academic performance, social emotional benefits, as well as improvements in teacher recruitment and retention. So lots more to this conversation coming up. But again, just wanted to have that moment of pause before we get into looking at some numbers. I am now going to mute and turn it over to Amy. She is going to share with us what data looks like as it relates to teacher diversity, a look nationally and locally.
Thank you very much. So we're going to have a look at research and data. So next slide, please. An abundance of research proves that diversity is important amongst teachers, but what we have, and we see this growing trend, when you look at there is a chronic representation of teachers of color in schools. So it's not even a hiring thing. There are not enough people of color entering the workforce to work as teachers. And it's not keeping pace with the growing diversity in our school. In fact, and this is nationwide, 79% of public school teachers are white, whereas over 50% of public school teachers or public students in public school students, I'm sorry, in the United States make up our student population. They have not kept up. Even next slide, please. When you look at Chesterfield County Public Schools, we've not been able to keep pace with our students, as now we are a majority school division. And it really is, and there's a quote by Sarah Liebel that just really resonates with me. And it's, it really is important that students have people who reflect back to them from their language, their culture, their ethnicity, their religion. It doesn't mean that all the people in their lives have to do that mirroring, but they should have some. And we know that in the teaching profession, there really are not enough mirrors. And that is Sarah Liebel, who is the master teacher in residence for the Harvard Teacher Fellows, which is a teacher fellowship program. And that really sets kind of the problem of practice that we have, because our schools and our school teachers do not mirror the students in Chesterfield County. But in fact, what we find ourselves, we're mirroring the national issue when you look at the underrepresentation of people of color in the education profession. So we are right hand in hand with what the national average says or the national data says. And when you look at this year, 55% of our students identified as students of color, whereas only 17.2% of our school teachers identified as teachers of color. We certainly have a mirroring issue. Next slide, please. And so here you just can see it represented graphically with our staff, the makeup, the demographic of our staff data on the right-hand side, and that of our students on the left-hand side. And that number has become increasingly diverse amongst our student population over the past 30 to 40 years, whereas it has stayed the same for our staff and had very little change. Next slide. And so what are the big factors that impact this disparity? There are many, but some of the ones that, kind of are within our locus of control. Only 27% of students enrolled in teacher preparation programs identify as people of color. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with this information, but we are experiencing a nationwide educator shortage amongst students, white students and students of color, but to a greater degree, our students of color are not choosing a pathway in education. For the few that do graduate from teacher education programs, fewer choose to go to, or very few choose to go to suburban school divisions that are not diverse. So they are opting to go to school divisions in which you have a greater diversity. So the more diverse you are, the more chance you are of attracting a diverse workforce. And then finally, teachers of color are more likely to leave education for other opportunities than their white counterparts. With a turnover rate, they have a higher turnover rate, nearing almost 20%. And that has been, and we've been looking into that. That is several things. It's the economics of choosing education. It is the community response to education as a career, and then also to cultures that do not support diverse workforces. Next slide. And ultimately, that teacher workforce really benefits all students. There is an abundance of research that proves that teacher diversity helps create positive outcomes for everyone. Schools should be staffed with this kaleidoscope of strong educators. It is not just something that benefits our students of color. It's something that enhances the work experience of teachers that are working in a diverse workforce. It helps allow for shared perspectives and backgrounds. There are academic outcomes beyond just test scores. Our students who have had teachers of color, students of color who have had teachers of color, sometimes just one or two, have an increased graduation rate. They also have a greater chance of attending college and graduating with post-secondary success. And students of color and white students both have positive perceptions of their teachers of color. I think it really helps bridge that gap just for everyone. Next slide. Maya?
All right, so we are going to get into some experiences that have been shared by teachers, personal and professional experiences as it relates to teacher diversity. And so perception is reality. Each of us come into our places and our spaces with our own lived experiences, our own beliefs, values, with a sense of how we identify as individuals. And sometimes we may say, you know, when I cross the threshold into my office or my workspace, I leave the personal me at the door and only bring my professional self in. And so to an extent, that is true. However, reality is our experiences, our beliefs, our values, how we identify as individuals, that impacts our connection to the world around us. It impacts the way we show up. It impacts how we present ourselves to others. It impacts how we receive others, etc. And so with speaking about cultivating a diverse teacher workforce, we must honor the voices, we must honor the perceptions and perspectives of those who live this, who live the very thing that we are talking about each and every day, and that is our teachers. And so Amy and I have a short video clip to share. It's from Edutopia, where teachers of color from different school divisions are sharing about their experiences, but then we're also going to share some of what our very own CCPS teachers have shared as part of our teacher diversity initiative. There is a narrative project component where we ask for teachers to share about their personal and professional stories and journeys, as well as their support, share about their support for teacher diversity. So we are going to, again, just share a short clip, and then we'll take a look at some of what our own teachers have shared. Hopefully you all are able to hear the sound. If not, please put in the chat that you can't, so that we can get it rectified on our end.
Growing up, I may have seen 3 or 4 Black teachers, and I didn't have any of them.
In Florida, it's very rare to see like a Black teacher, a Black doctor, a Black lawyer. So I struggled trying to see myself and like educated people.
A very vivid memory that sticks with me. I walked into the first day with my little uniform and my backpack, and I was really excited. I was the only person of color in the classroom. I remember thinking very clearly, I am different.
I always longed for a teacher that looked like me, who I could confide in, who like understood where I was coming from. And so part of what I wanted to do is help, you know, African American girls who are kind of searching for the same thing. Like, I wanted to be that person.
At my college, that was the first time I'd had someone standing up in front of me that looks like me. And that was really transformative and a big reason as to why I wanted to enter the classroom myself and kind of give back.
I was married, I started having kids, and you always come to that question, what's the lasting impression you want to leave? Looking at my kids, I kind of figured out I just want to be an influence where maybe I haven't had those influences in my life.
I didn't come to the classroom knowing kind of all the statistics. I kind of came very bright-eyed and very bushy-tailed and just thinking, oh, I want to teach. Very, very quickly, you understand the stakes are really high for Black and brown students who I get to see every single day.
A lot of students, they don't want to talk to you. You're told to stay quiet, stay low, stay humble. So most of them have a hard time just opening it up and talking about just anything.
Sometimes like I'm able to sit down with kids and like really talk to them, and those are like always my favorite moments because I come from a really like rough background, and so, you know, it's always like surprising to kids to hear like, oh, this teacher who grades me, she has a similar background, and if they're ready to talk, they'll come talk, and if they don't want to talk, they don't. I get that.
I never tell people what I do. Usually being a black man, no one's expecting me to be a teacher. So I'm usually disrespected on a daily. When they find out I'm a teacher, you can see the respect level change. They act and they talk to me differently. I kind of find that part disrespectful, that you would change the way that you talk to me just because of what I do.
I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a teacher. And depending on who I'm talking to, I feel either really, really good about it or like, okay, you guys can stop talking about it now. People just seem shocked sometimes to hear that there's a black person who's educated, who teaches children.
The impact that I'm making is going to be slightly different on my kids than the impact that some of my colleagues are going to make. But also, like, it's a responsibility that I sometimes am not always, like, aware of how to navigate.
You have to make sure you uphold your integrity every single day. Even though sometimes I might want to get mad at something small, where another teacher may get mad at something small and it's acceptable for them, all of those students are looking up to me and looking to see what you do in situations. But it's good to see that what I do and say may have a lasting effect on someone else's life.
And so we wanted to share that video, again, just some perspectives and perceptions and experiences shared by teachers of color, Black teachers in particular, across a few school divisions. And so on the next slide, before I get into that, just want to provide some context, but on the next slide, we are going to share about some of what our very own teachers have communicated with us as it relates to their personal and professional journey. And so just to provide some context about how this came to be, as part of our teacher diversity initiative, which we will get into in just a moment, we asked teachers to share about their experiences, again, personally and professionally, whatever they were comfortable sharing as it relates to their experiences with teacher diversity. So I'm just going to read just a couple of excerpts, because again, we have to take into consideration and ground the experiences of those who are part of our community. So again, these excerpts each are from a current teacher of Chesterfield County Public Schools. And so starting at the top left, in 1995, I started kindergarten in Chesterfield County Public Schools as the only Hispanic girl in the grade. My Black frizzy hair and hazel eyes stood out among my peers. What are you? Is a question I would get often. My parents and I spoke English at home because they were told that a second language would hinder my growth in reading and writing English. My parents were very loving but protective at times as they navigated parenting in a completely different world from where they grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I did not have a single Hispanic teacher throughout my education. I had maybe 2 teachers throughout my entire education that had an ethnicity other than white. I really didn't realize the effects of this until I became an adult. And I now realize the importance of a diverse workforce, especially in education. Going over to the top right, as a 2016 graduate of Chesterfield County Public Schools, I experienced firsthand the lack of diversity in the workplace. Through my 13 years of public schooling, I had a total of 4 Black and brown teachers that looked like me. I do not believe that the quality of education I received would have been different, but I believe the connections I built would have been more meaningful. Last year was my first year of teaching, and one of my favorite memories is when a student walked in with her natural hair in a blowout similar to mine, and the whole class simultaneously said, "You two are twins." My student was able to experience this due to having a teacher that mirrored her. Bottom left, speaking for myself, I can see how the times that I grew most in awareness allyship, and advocacy were times that I spent significant time in quality conversations with people who were different from me. And bottom right, I went through all of my educational courses being the only Asian in the room. I was the only Asian teacher in the school I taught, and I was the only Asian administrator in a district before I left. And so when I met someone who connected with me on my first day of work at Chesterfield County Public Schools, I knew I had arrived at the right place. And at that time, we also had an African-American superintendent, something I'd never encountered before. And so when we are speaking about cultivating a diverse teacher workforce, it's not enough to simply speak in a checking of the box kind of way. We hired another Black teacher, check. We hired a Hispanic teacher, check. What does our system and our culture say about the way we value our diverse community of teachers, of educators? Are their thoughts, are their perspectives, ideas taken into consideration as is what may be considered the dominant narrative or culture? Are there systems of support to combat what can feel like isolation? Hiring is a step, of course, and it is a step in the right direction, but it is simply not enough to just recruit and hire. We must, again, be intentional in our efforts to cultivate and sustain a culture of valuing a diverse teacher and educator workforce. Just because I say, come on, this is a safe space or an inclusive space, doesn't make it so for the person who I am speaking to. Like, just because I said it doesn't make it so. So we cannot just jump to that. Rather, we must be mindful of our supports. So what can we do to support truly cultivating and sustaining a diverse teacher workforce in so it's deeply felt and in a way that outlasts any one of us? I'll stay here for a second. Just want to share Brittany Hogan. She is the former director of, I hope I have her title correct, Educational Equity and Diversity in St. Louis, Missouri for the Rockwood School District. She speaks about this in her writing. She recently wrote a journal article, and she stated, showing up as a smaller version of yourself does nothing to help the greater good. And so when we speak about culture work, when we speak about sustaining a diverse teacher workforce, when we speak about ensuring that our teachers, our educators are feel, seen, valued, heard, we also have to ask ourselves, is our system designed in such a way that our teachers of color, any teacher, of course, but for the context in which we are speaking, teachers of color, are they allowed to show up and show out? Or are they made to feel as though they need to present themselves as a smaller version of who they are? And if so, if that's the case, we can recruit, we can hire many teachers of color, but that does not mean we are going to retain them. It does not mean that we will foster the connection and the professional space that is needed for them to thrive. And so what can we do? We're going to just take a look at some supportive practices that can promote sustaining a diverse teacher workforce. This list is certainly not exhaustive, and I'm looking at time and thinking about what we have left to cover. So I'll just highlight some of what's listed. Relationships and building true connection. That's the foundation for so many things. And so hiring and retaining is absolutely no different, especially when we are speaking about diversifying the teacher or educator workforce. A key to retaining teachers of color is through supportive mentoring partnerships. Coaching and mentoring for teachers of color allows for teachers to grow and feel supported. Mentoring in culturally responsive ways. And that means grounding who our teachers are, who they are as individuals throughout the professional learning process, so we can tap into relevance for our teachers. Culture is not a monolith, it's multidimensional, it's multifaceted. So culturally based knowledge can help to, in a strong sense, inform professional development and mentoring relationships. We often are involved in conversations or may hear about conversations that encourage teachers to design differentiated learning experiences in their classrooms to address the unique needs of their students. And so as school divisions, we must also take the same into consideration when we are thinking about supporting and growing our own teachers. Another supportive practice, again, affirmation and empowerment. Affirm who I am and help empower me to bring my full self and full potential to my professional place, my professional space. Going back to what I shared about Brittany Hogan's writings, again, is our system designed in such a way that our teachers of color are allowed to show up and show out? Or again, are they made to feel as though they need to present themselves as a smaller version of who they are? So affirmation and empowerment for our teachers is so, so important. The Education Trust published results to a survey that they've conducted, and you're able to view this if you look it up, but a nationwide survey. And within that report, they shared that through a nationwide survey, close to 1,000 teachers of color, they found that teachers of color have more negative experiences with school culture and working conditions than their counterparts, and that these working conditions are the primary driver of whether or not they decide to remain in the profession. Teachers of color may also take on added responsibility because of connections with students, and they also acknowledge that while this does not capture the experiences of all teachers of color, so do not want to overgeneralize, but knowing this, having a foundational awareness or understanding of this can help district leaders, division leaders, policymakers make better and more strategic investments in improving conditions that have a positive impact on diversity of the teacher workforce. And one last thing, again, just looking at time and what we have left to cover, one thing I also want to touch on is shared belief and responsibility, which goes along with the lines of culture work. Raising awareness about the importance of teacher diversity is very important so that each of us can have, again, going back to foundational awareness, so that we can have a foundational awareness of the ways in which teacher diversity supports the educational process for students, for our families, and for staff. And so with that stated, very respectfully will say it is not only on the teachers of color to speak about the importance of teacher diversity. It's incumbent upon us to collectively support, speak about, and be proponents for diversifying our teacher workforce. And so again, there is doing so in a compliance-driven way. And then there is culture work. We implore each of you and us to support culture work. Excuse me. And so I'm going to turn it over to Amy in just a moment. We want to speak about Mirror Me, which is our division's teacher diversity initiative. Excuse me, we have partnered with Virginia State University as well as Virginia Commonwealth University, so VCU and VSU, to support students on a pathway to teacher licensure so that they can come back, be connected with Chesterfield County, and teach as licensed educators. And so these are the program objectives of Mirror Me. We are committed to, again, cultivating and sustaining a diverse teacher workforce. And so through Mirror Me aims to increase the number of minority teachers within CCPS change the perceptions of hiring practices within Chesterfield County Public Schools, and promote the importance of the teaching profession within. And so it's very targeted. We want to make sure that we are supporting a pipeline for our students to see themselves in the profession, but not only see themselves in the profession, have support from us as a school division and as an organization to see them through their teacher prep program and connect them again back with Chesterfield County as licensed teachers. And so this is, Mirror Me is really in alignment to what we share as a priority for our school division. Our school division has a strategic plan called Imagine Tomorrow. And through Imagine Tomorrow, we share our commitment to be intentional with our efforts to hire and retain staff that align with the demographics of the community we serve. We also share the strategies that we will employ to do so. So partnering with universities and organizations to support recruitment, cultivate partnerships with local universities to provide CCPS graduates the opportunity to complete teacher prep programs and again, return to CCPS as licensed educators, et cetera. So Mirror Me really does support the work that we have shared with our community as being priority, but it also supports the intentionality that needs to occur when we speak about culture work. And so I'm going to turn it over to Amy. She's going to speak about our partnerships and supportive practices for our students.
Thank you so much. So when we look at Mirror Me and this approach, we are really and truly, and we spoke about this being a national issue. However, we are committed as a school division to find local solutions to this national issue, right, within our scope of control. So it really is about supporting and building a strong pathway to education as a career. And that was centered in, currently having strong partnerships with our local universities. So that's been a critical piece of this, both VSU and VCU, who have large, robust education programs. That makes a very logical support, like next step, to have a connection with them and a partnership with them for students from Chesterfield County who decide that they would like to pursue a career in education. So that really started the conversation. How could we work with the people that are educating our educators, and a large percentage of those entering education throughout the state of Virginia are coming from these two schools. And so how can we work with them to get their students to stay here, to send our students to these two universities? So that really began part of it. And this work truly is something that goes, and usually when you think about hiring and you think about diversifying a teacher workforce, your immediate thought goes to the hiring table. So that's a human resources issue. But what we have realized is this is something that we all play a role in. A diverse teacher workforce is really something that is that can be taken care of. And did we lose this slide? That can be taken care of, or that should be taking responsibility for everyone in the division. Dr. Johnson, do we have the slide deck?
Yes, I'm so sorry. One of my cables just came out. I'm getting it back up right now.
It's so not a problem. And I can actually speak to some of this too without the slide deck in front of me, because I can pull it up. But that is where this program started. This is where it started with that relationship. And as we worked through it, and Dr. Johnson referenced our school division strategic plan. A key component of that strategic plan is by the way by which we approach our work. So the 4 core values that we come to our work in Chesterfield County Public Schools is through ingenuity, equity, teamwork, and integrity. And when you think about those things, that is really driven into this work. So as you look at some of these things that we are doing to support not only our students from Mirror Me, but how this work looks, coming in and with absolute transparency, having and seeking the voices from current teachers, from students around what their experience is like as teachers of color and as students of color. And, sometimes it's difficult to hear, but we feel very committed to letting that drive what the supports are that we are providing. The teamwork piece, we are partnering with division level staff and work groups, as well as community partners and stakeholders that have a shared value and see the need for this. So some of the partners outside of these two universities that we have really leaned into would be, our corporate partners that have been doing the DEI work for quite some time, local foundations such as the Education Foundation, Community Foundation, Robbins Foundation, not only from a funding standpoint, but have been critical just in helping us define what this work looks like. And then when students apply, we're going to have rolling admissions, and we actually have an open application right now, quarterly rolling admissions that students will apply beginning junior and senior year is when they'll be eligible. And then the application process is very interest-based. So we want to see, really where you are thinking in terms of and why you're driven to think that, you may want to have a career in education. Once they are accepted into the program, they'll be paired with a CCPS staff person that will act as their Mirror Me mentor that will help get them more strongly connected into the CCPS community, and then experiences that might inform their pathway, and then helping through financial incentives. Once they are undergraduates, they will be receiving a stipend of $500 per semester that they can spend towards whatever college costs they may have. But then in addition to that, having some really intentional conversations with the student and their caregivers about the financial aid process, and making sure that they are tapping into any opportunity that might exist within their university. And then also access to dual enrollment courses while they are at Chesterfield County Public Schools while they're still in high school. And then priority hiring opportunities throughout their undergraduate experience. So summer work, part-time teaching at teacher aide, working in after-school programs, summer school, and then opportunity to a pathway for employment as they graduate from their undergraduate program. Next slide, please. This is really important work. Our community is a diverse one. And as we look at sustaining this culture that values diversity, this is more than just a one-time initiative to have a program to strengthen the pipeline. This is really part of our greater commitment to making sure that all means all in Chesterfield County. So focused on sustaining this culture that values diversity, and then just elevating and lifting voices through inclusion, affirmation, and empowerment. So again, and I can't drive this home enough, Dr. Johnson says it so well, it's not just about making the hiring decision. You can quickly diversify if that's your direction, but it's really keeping people or creating an environment that people want to and they see themselves in Chesterfield County. And then really providing our students that mirror. I think it's such an important thing that they see themselves in what they're learning, more importantly, who's teaching them, and then teachers that see themselves in their students. Next slide. Dr. Johnson.
And again, we wanted to sandwich our presentation with this. So you saw this at the beginning of the presentation, and we wanted to make sure that we came full circle right back around to it at the end, because a diverse teacher workforce benefits all students, and we can add staff onto that as well. And so we were speaking about, Mirror Me as a diverse teacher initiative. Again, as Amy shared, it's so much more than an initiative. We're looking to contribute to a culture and a system that outlasts any one of us. So when Amy and me and the division leaders who are currently in their professional seats, even if we are not in our professional seats, these same professional seats, years from now, we want to make sure that there has been a foundation that can continually be built upon. And so a diverse teacher word, this isn't the when we speak about the work and the intentionality with the work, it's not the work just for students of color. Research shows there are significant implications, and we can speak to that. But a diverse teacher workforce benefits all students, and again, we can say that for the same for staff. And so I won't go through all of this, want to see if there are any comments or questions, but again, we wanted to sandwich our presentation, for lack of a better word, with these points. And so you see students of color benefit from having teacher expectations, higher teacher expectations, and from seeing members of their own race, ethnicity. Teacher diversity creates an environment where all teachers share and learn from others' perspectives beyond academic outcomes and increased graduation rates. Teachers of color continue to impact their students beyond K-12 with increased college attendance and post-secondary success. And students of color, as well as white students, report having positive perceptions of their teachers of color, including feeling cared for and academically challenged. And so again, it's incumbent upon all of us to not speak of this work, to not engage in this work in just a checking of the box or compliance-based type way. I do not want to discount compliance. I certainly understand that Amy and I are both representatives of a local education authority and a public education authority at that. And so with that, there comes compliance as governed by our governing Department of Education. So, but do not mean in that way. Again, just a checking of the box to say, okay, another one hired, another one hired. But again, truly engage in this work, walking hand in hand to cultivate and again, sustain a culture of valuing a diverse teacher workforce. Again, it takes all of us, it takes shared responsibility. And so we thank you all so much for spending your Monday evening with us. We hope that you all have takeaways from tonight's presentation and appreciate each of you. Again, appreciate Jesse, you and your team, the Chesterfield County Public Library. Very truly humbled that you all have reached out to us and collaborated with us for tonight's presentation. So just thank you all very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. I have to say that was a lot of information, but I really appreciated, it really makes you think that we are up against a culture. And I know that while I'm watching this, I was thinking, getting young girls into STEM classes and getting them interested in the sciences, that became like a cultural moment and a cultural cause. How can we make the cause you're talking about tonight, getting more diverse students in front of our teachers, which is just as important as anything else, how can we make that more of a cultural moment and make it try to make a difference? I know you guys are doing it, and I appreciate the work that you are doing in that struggle.
Absolutely, and thank you for the, oh, Amy, I see you've unmuted. Go ahead and I'll piggyback.
Well, I just, I think when you start to look at how do we, and I think that teachers have for a very long time underestimated their role in kind of really turning kids on to the opportunity to become teachers themselves. And I think that, starting at the classroom teacher, the way that we speak about our career and our career choice in front of our students is certainly a critical piece, but then also to, having that conversation with the young people in your life around, have you considered this? A lot of times, it is the one adult that will say, have you thought about this? This might be something that I could see you do. I mean, you would bring so much to this opportunity, and you could have an opportunity to really change and support and help other people with it. The way that we speak about education, I think is so important. And, I have talked to teachers that, are young teachers that are working in this field, and they'll be like, my high school teacher said that I was too smart to go into education, or they told me it was a thankless job. And certainly this has been, it can be tough, but, it's being mindful of the way that you speak about the education career and a career in education with the young people, I think is really important.
Amy, I think you said that so beautifully. I really do not have anything much to add other than this is really just an extension of your response, and that is continuing to engage all in the conversation to discuss the underpinning why. And so, why? Right. And we have to, when we're speaking, again, sometimes we may, throw out data or throw out some sayings and may think that the person who's on the receiving end of it takes it the same way, dissects it, reflects upon it the same way, understands it the same way. And so with anything, especially when we're dealing with our most precious resource, people, right? Students, our teachers, we have to humanize the process and humanize what it is that we are speaking about. And so again, this isn't saying anything different or new. Amy, I think you said it beautifully. This is just an extension, but continuing to engage all in the conversation about the underpinning why as it relates to a diverse teacher workforce. And again, that is the educational outcomes and the benefits for all students as well as staff and families.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And the last thing I'll say, is I know every person in here and every person who watches a recording of this will remember their first or second grade teacher. I remember my first and second grade teacher. And, when we have to talk, these things that you talked about tonight are so clear and they're so obvious, but how we remember teachers and how important them standing in front of the class meant to us and what that represents to us. And I think you all made that point really well tonight and really reminded me of the power of those first people who really reached out and encouraged me or, was a good teacher and a good role model for me and how important that is. And I do appreciate you all for doing that.
Thank you. I do, just if that's okay, Dr. Johnson, I would just want, you said that, Jesse, and it made me think of when I very first started teaching, I had a principal who said, do you remember being in middle school? I taught middle school. And I did, and I had a teacher that I really connected to, and he said, do you remember her words to you and why she was important? And I said, yes. And so he said, the best advice I can give you is put a picture of yourself at the age of the students that you teach, because it makes you, I remember the strength of those words and those actions and how they impacted me in a positive way, and then sometimes not in a positive way. And I think you don't understand, or you shortchange the power that you have and that you play as an educator, a school counselor, any adult in a school building. And I think that we need to all be reminded of that.
That's so true. Thank you, Amy, and also Jesse. If it's okay, I'm looking at the time. I know it's 7:59, so I just want to put our, not just to show our pictures again, but our contact information. So for those who have joined us this evening, for those who are watching the recording, if you want to connect with us after this presentation, after our time together in this virtual space this evening, there is our email address. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you'd like to connect further. Thank you, Jesse. I just wanted to make sure I put that up for anyone who would like